Hello. Can you hear me? Perfect.
I'm declaring this state of emergency because you need to know what's happening. If you care about public schools in North Carolina, it's time to take immediate action and tell them to stop the damage that will set back our schools for a generation. Here's what's happening in the next few weeks. Their private school voucher scheme will pour your tax money into private schools that are unaccountable.
That was Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina and his state of emergency announcement.
It's Friday. And
that means that school choice has become a state of emergency in North Carolina. There we are. Thank you for joining us on the afternoon constitutional. So the prospect of money following the child's school choice has risen to the level of hurricanes and, dare I say, pandemics. At least that's according to Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina. Joining us now, one of the folks that I hope you are going to join us when we're doing this show and my local morning radio show from Freedom Fest in Memphis, Tennessee this year. It's an amazing organization. Milton Friedman is such an amazingly powerful figure in our world, and not just for his economics, but after he was done with all that, he founded an organization called Ed Choice. And Nathan Sanders joins us from Ed Choice to talk about the state of the emergency in North Carolina because of this pending school choice legislation. Nathan, thank you for joining us. How are you doing this afternoon?
Joe, I am doing well. How are you doing?
Well, I wish I worked for the Friedmans, but other than that, and that's just because any conservative free marketeer would say, if I could work for the Friedman Foundation, it would be worth it. So was this expected? I mean, I know that a lot of folks expected the veto override. A lot of the governor vetoed it. A standard. It's a conservative-leaning legislature, so they figured, okay, we get it. He's going to veto the legislation. We understand all that. But what really surprised a lot of folks was this immediate and draconian attempt to take power and bring this state of emergency into North Carolina. What was the reaction when you first heard that that's what he was doing?
Yeah, it was interesting. I don't think it was expected. Everyone, the governor's office has been a very loud and vocal opponent of this voucher expansion. There's no debate there. But I don't think that there was a state of emergency announcement expected from the governor's office, especially without any type of executive action. It just seemed like an attempt by the governor's office to sort of, try to fire a light under people to contact their legislatures and get the conversations going. But luckily, the legislature has already passed the version in the House overwhelmingly with bipartisan support, and people and parents are excited about it, which is just fantastic.
So this doesn't have like teeth to it. I mean, he can't like send the legislature. When I first heard that the governor was doing this, I thought, oh my God, is he like kicking the legislature out? Is he saying that that the House can't meet because of a state of emergency? We went through that here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We had the House of Delegates was meeting from their houses over Zoom, and the state Senate were sitting in plasticine boxes to keep safe and under the governor's COVID restrictions. So it was very close to keeping the legislatures from meeting. But it isn't anything. It isn't anything like that, is it, Jordan? Nathan?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just a statement from the governor's office to the legislature saying that they're going to continue to fight this and they're going to continue to oppose this. And so luckily the legislature has a couple of ways to fight back and to represent the people of North Carolina and say, this is what folks want. This is what polling shows. And this is what we're hearing from parents. And so I don't think so. I think this is just the governor's office way of saying that they're going to continue to fight this.
So what happens next? You mentioned that they've already started the override process through the House, and then the Senate goes in. What is the standard in North Carolina for a veto override? And I should note that not only are you with Ed Choice, but you are also Ed Choice's North Carolina coordinator and field director. So you would know best out of both of us.
Yeah, that's right. And they haven't begun the override process. And so they've just passed the bill in the House version, Representative Cotham's bill. And they could go about it a couple different ways, the legislature could. And they've discussed, and the speakers discussed going both ways. And that is sending that bill now to the Senate for the Senate to pass, which the Senate has an overwhelming amount of support there to pass their bill. And then it would go on to the governor's desk and an expected veto, of course. Now, the legislature has the supermajority to override a veto, or they could go the budget process. And now that it's passed the House, they could fit it into the budget. The speaker could and pass that through the House and Senate and send that to the governor. It'll be a little bit more difficult for the governor to veto a budget. And so I'm not sure exactly which route they'll take. They have a couple different options. I'm sure and hope that the speaker takes the most strategic route, but the legislature definitely has some leverage here for sure.
Well, then, so take us into what this particular. I know we tried in Virginia to get a school choice bill, Money Follows the Child Education Success Accounts. The past General Assembly and the firewall in our Virginia Senate blocked it from getting to Governor Youngkin's desk. So, what does the North Carolina legislation do? Is it very similar, where it's you don't have to meet any standards? You just are able to tap into a percentage of the monies that the state would have been spending on your son or daughter's education to use as you see fit, whether it be for homeschooling or for I guess school supplies there, or for a parochial school of your choice. Is that kind of what you got there in North Carolina as well?
Sure. So it's an expansion, a universal school choice expansion of their current opportunity scholarship voucher. And so what they're expanding that to is it's a bit tiered in terms of income. And so the first layer is if you're at the free and reduced lunch rate, 100% or below of the free and reduced lunch rate, then you get 100% of your average state funding to go into a school of your choice, which is just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
And the next layer of that, I believe, is I have some of my notes here, so I'll get the numbers wrong. The next layer of that is 100% of free and reduced to 200%. You'll get about 90% of that average funding. And then from 200% to 450%, you'll get about 60% of that funding. And then at the last tier, 450% of free and reduced lunch and higher, you'll get about 45%. So the good news is everyone's eligible, but there's different tiers based on income to go to a school of your choice.
Well, currently, I mean, many years ago, Virginia came up with a scholarship program, which was a tax advantage scholarship program, which is what's the expression they use in the mountains, like kissing your sister, because you still had to apply from the State Board of Education. You still had to be approved by the state. And this became the big fight, is that they rallied the wagons. They got some Republican members of the House of Delegates even to say, no, we're going to defend this because we don't want, and it becomes the demagoguing that I heard in Governor Cooper's statement, which is we don't want those rich people taking all their money away from our schools. When Nathan, I don't think there's any empirical evidence that says when school choice voucher programs go into effect, the schools suffer at all. Am I missed anything?
Not at all. I mean, and the reality of it is, Governor Cooper quoted millionaires a good bit, and millionaires already have school choice.
Yeah.
They have the income to go to whatever school of choice they want because they have that income to do so. These types of programs, the Opportunity Scholarship and other states' similar programs, are for lower to middle class families who don't have that disposable income but want to get the best education that they see fit for their child. And that's the great thing about these programs is, yes, in a universal programs, quote unquote, millionaires, higher class people are eligible.
Mm-hmm.
but this specifically helps everyone. That's what universal
Right.
eligibility is about. And so that's the great thing about these programs.
And it doesn't take away some millionaire's taxes. He all of a sudden, or she doesn't all of a sudden become tax exempt because they've started to do school choice, which is again how Governor Cooper seemed to make it sound.
Right. Yeah, not at all. Not at all.
So compare North Carolina's plan. Nathan Sanders is on with us from Ed Choice. He's their North Carolina field director there. So compare North Carolina's plan to some of the other ones that are already in effect around the country, because I kind of like the way you've graded it off of the free and school lunch requirements. I know that there are a lot of folks you'll probably run into them at Freedom Fest who don't think free and school lunch should exist either. But if you've got it, it does seem like it's a reasonable standard to start looking at that. Compare what North Carolina's plan is, pending whatever veto the governor has in his state of emergency, to what other states have already been doing.
Sure, absolutely. So North Carolina, this is I guess you could call it a voucher plus. It's essentially there's more uses in terms of the funds than your typical voucher. Just a voucher is just a piece of paper going from one school to the other. But this one has some more broad uses in terms of
Okay.
transportation and textbooks and funds. And so that's what this program's about. But if you look at a program like West Virginia, the Hope Scholarship, that is an ESA, right? A universal ESA that essentially allows parents to have access to a government regulated account to use these funds as they see fit. Still a bit regulated, but they're able to use it on transportation and textbooks and curriculum if they're homeschooling or
Hmm.
virtual school. So it's a bit more in terms of use is broad, but the thought process is still there, which is parents have their say and their control over what their child is learning, how they're learning, and where they're learning, right? And so some of these states are doing it differently, but the thought process there is still the same.
And it's been remarkably well received, if I understand it. My friends still tease us here in the Commonwealth. They refer to it as best Virginia. I don't understand what they're trying to say with that, Nathan. But all of these laboratories of democracy where we're seeing this take place is, I think, a natural evolution, because public schools, even in my lifetime, were an option for families rather than the must have. And it's somewhere along the line, it became almost a real estate sales kit. Oh, well, we have great schools here, so build your subdivision here. And it became much more politically important to be seen as having great schools, Nathan. And I guess that's where the classic paradigm that I've always heard, that if you have schools funded by property taxes, you're always going to have gentrification and failing schools, which I think as we look around the country, that's pretty much what we're seeing in a lot of especially in the inner cities.
Yeah, and look, we don't get too much into the funding formulas and how that's funded at all. We basically focus on educational freedom
Hmm.
as a pathway for all for successful lives. But to your first point there, and that's exactly what we focus on with our data and our research and our partnerships is we're not worried about sort of the systems that are being funded, but rather we're worried about the education and the parental choice in that. And the polling
Hmm.
shows that. And no matter which state you go to, it's sitting around 70 to 80% that school parents who have a vested interest in this support these types of school choice programs, whether they're an education savings account or a voucher program. Parents support this because they want different options for their kids.
When the revolution is over, Nathan, will there be a portrait of Terry McAuliffe on that debate stage in Northern Virginia saying, and I love when he sticks his hands in his pockets. Of course, I don't want parents to have a say. I don't think parents should have a say in what their kids are doing, because really, I mean, that is the Lexington and Concord moment in the battle for parents' rights and school choice, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's such an interesting point because parents have been the leading effort in this. I mean, we can talk about legislation and legislators. We can talk about organizations like ours, Ed Choice,
Hmm.
but parents are the driving force in this. Parents, especially in the last couple of years with pandemic and different things like that, have seen that their child's education is the most important thing in some of these family circles, and that's the driving force. And the polling shows that the passion in these legislative sessions that we've witnessed shows that. And so, yeah, no, I agree. I mean, parents get what parents are getting what they want, and these programs are the best options for parents.
Well, certainly, if it's gotten to the point where President Biden's Department of Justice is listing parents that yell at school board members as domestic terrorists, I got to think somebody's had a nerve touched there. How far can this go from where you said? I don't know how long you've been with Ed Choice, but I've been doing this program and programs like it in Charlottesville for 17 plus years, and we've danced around this a few times. There's always that fear that an elected official going to the government and then taking power away from the government is very hard to sell, but it seems like, especially as organizations like yours at Ed Choice gather more and more empirical data of schools and cities that have flourished both in the public school space and in the school choice space, it's going to become a harder and harder debate to have from the side of state-run, indoctrinative, tell the kids anything they want, tell the parents nothing kind of schools. Don't you think?
Absolutely. I mean, as we've already talked about polling. The polling shows overwhelmingly that school parents support these programs. But also, if you look at the data, it shows good results in terms of academics, in terms of parental satisfaction. And so, as more and more of these programs are implemented and more data starts to come out about the success and the parental satisfaction of these programs, I mean, legislators are going to hardly have anything to argue with. One thing that stands out in Cooper's address was he had mentioned, I don't know if I'm paraphrasing, but he had mentioned that that we must choose classrooms over corporations. And my first thought was, you must choose parents over classrooms and parents over
Right.
anything, because this is what parents want, and parents are consistently telling you this. And because, look, I don't want to talk too long on this, but if you look at, we did regional polling in North Carolina specifically for North Carolina parents, and the question was, what do you want your child to get out of their education? And the answers were all over the map. And that's the point, is parents have different ideas and
Hmm.
different wants their child's need based on what their child's best at and what they want for their child. It ranged from core academics to social and moral things like that, socialization. So it ranged from all over the place. And so this is what parents want, and I think that's going to be a lasting nail in the coffin as more and more of these programs are implemented to elected officials and policymakers.
Ed Choice is going to be one of the programs there, and I don't know how many folks from Ed Choice are going to be coming to Freedom Fest this year. It was unplanned. All of a sudden, I realized that you've got your president is one of the speakers, and there's going to be a big portion of Freedom Fest dedicated. And I hope you all can join us there in Memphis. First off, it's Memphis. Second off, Ed Choice will be there. Third off, I'll be there. And then, there's some other peoples like JP Sears and folks like that, comedians and folks like that, and as well as Tulsi Gabbard will also be there, and some other folks, John Stossels of the world and things like that, and the Anthem Film Festival. So I do hope you can join us. I'm so excited about it. I'm knocking my studio part here, Nathan. But when we look at, and I've told this story before, they're bored with it, but I'm the guy that read The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy to my kids as a bedtime story, and I'm talking about pre-tween, and so my kids got a different kind of upbringing. So I'm not one to say what is and isn't for a parent, but I certainly think a publicly funded school library a parent should have, as the phrase goes, choice in what books are available to them and that kind of thing. Is that another plank in this debate about school choice, where parents are saying, well, hold it, if I can't have any say about what books are in my kids' school library or even in their curriculum, I definitely want to bring them and take them somewhere else. Is that part of it too?
Absolutely. I mean, parents are choosing different types of education for their kids. The reasons are all over the map, and that's the beautiful thing about school choice is some parents want are looking into their current schools, whether that be public or non-public, and are dissatisfied with curriculum and resources, and they're saying
Hmm.
we want something else. And then with these programs implemented, you have the option to take that and go somewhere else. Some parents are saying, I want to take my kid out of institutionalized school completely and homeschool them or virtual school them, and they're able to do that with some funds. And so the reasons for this, it just depends on each child and each parent, and that's the beautiful thing about school choice. So yeah, absolutely.
Well, when you see what's going on in New York, Nathan Sanders from Ed Choice is on with us on the afternoon constitutional. Again, thanks to our friends over here at govoversight.org, the Government Oversight and Accountability Group. When you even see parents protesting in the city of New York over, in this case, the undocumented migrants being stored in the gymnasiums of their kids' elementary schools, and parents are like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! What the heck is going on? I thought school security and those kind of things were important." Are I think there was one of the conventions I was at, "Awake, not woke" was the slogan. But I think that parents are waking up to what's being done in their kids' schools. If even New York City is starting to protest the public schools, that's a big deal.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And that reminds me of just sort of the amount of these programs that were introduced in state legislatures just this session, which I have it written down so I wouldn't forget. 104, that's over 100 educational choice bills were introduced just
Whoa!
this session from January to now in 40 different states. That's 83%, 83.7% rather, related to an ESA, an education savings account. So this just goes to show you that these legislatures are listening to parents, and they're listening sort of and paying attention to the national, what's going on nationally, and saying, hey, our state needs this because this is what parents want. And this session, I think, was just first of all, there's lots of wins this session in different
Hmm.
states in terms of these programs, but this session was also, I think, was just another phase of, okay, let's introduce over 100. And then
Right.
it just gets me more excited for next session because there's going to be more introduced, meaning there's going to be more passed, and which is extremely exciting. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, even in states like New York and California, I think you're going to start to see some programs gaining some steam.
Well, and that seems like a stunning number. I mean, I can remember when we were first having these discussions, and folks like Lindsay Burke, who's one of the fellows at Ed Choice, and other folks from Ed Choice and other school choice organizations were on with me, and we talk about Milwaukee, Miami, and there was a handful. I mean, you could count them on one hand, the number of places that you could go for an example of a school choice education savings account, money follows the child kind of example. 80 different states. I mean, I mean, not 80 states, 80% of the
Yep.
states. I mean, that's stunning. It must be tough to keep up with, Nathan.
Yeah, we have a very talented and large team at Ed Choice that is dedicated to the fight, dedicated to educational freedom, and so it's a wonderful thing to work for the Freedmans, and it's especially a wonderful thing to work in educational freedom. I come from a background, my family, deep in education. My mom's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, and so I care about this issue deeply. I care about children and them and their families having the access to a quality education of their choice. So yeah, absolutely. We've been working hard, but we love it.
So, what's Thanksgiving like when you talk about school choice? Does your mom get it?
Absolutely. I tell people all the time, especially in the school choice space, my mother, who's a public school teacher, is probably the best proponent of these school choice programs because she's been teaching for almost 30 years. And so she sees every single day students who maybe they're struggling because of class size or struggling
Mhm.
because of the curriculum or whatever.
Right,
But every year, it never fails. She has a handful of students who it's just not working for them. And it's not their fault. They're not dumb
right.
kids. Maybe they don't even have bad home lives, but like they need something different, but they're stuck in a district that doesn't have many options. And, that's, she's the biggest proponent because of that. She sees on the ground real issues.
Hmm. Does Governor Cooper qualify for the Terry Award for 2023 for being so hooked into the teachers union? And I say that not because I had anything particularly political against Glenn Youngkin or Terry McAuliffe, but Terry's not an unintelligent man, and brother was in the war room with Bill Clinton and George Stephanopoulos and James Carville. I guarantee at some point James Carville was on the phone with Terry McAuliffe saying, "Boy, do you understand how much you're going to lose by if you keep talking like this?" But it just struck me that the whole narrative of the 2021 Virginia election was built around the power of the teachers union and Randy Weingarten, flush off of the successes of COVID-19 and the lockdowns and protecting the teachers and decimating a generation of students in the process. That Governor Cooper seems like he's cut from the same thing. He's got a really tight leash tied to the teachers unions, and he can't. Maybe he just doesn't want to negotiate something where the teachers unions have to know that there have to be more teachers within the teachers union like your mom.
Yeah, well, I'll leave the award giving up to you, but I'll tell you this. I mean, we're definitely not against public schools. Public schools work for some kids and some families, undoubtedly. But I'll say, I think that's why it's important to, when we look at the polling and we look at the data and the research that shows, academic performance and funding and different things like that. I think that's why it's so important to talk to opponents or skeptics of these choice programs to say, look, we're not talking about partisan politics. We're not talking about misconceptions. We're talking about what this shows, what parents want, what the data shows. And I think that especially in North Carolina after, this session and then just after COVID, I think parents vote, but also, parents are letting their voices be heard, not only to the legislature, but to Governor Cooper and to the governor's office. And I think it's great because they're doing a great job and parents want school choice. So.
Now, you're the North Carolina director for Ed Choice, so you know these people better than anyone, certainly better than me. So what does Governor Cooper do once the bill, comes back to him? You said, he's vetoed. And now they're working on a new package. What is the next step for him? Does he finally say, "All right, I got it," message heard, or does he dig in and continue down this, state schools are the best schools?
Well, he hasn't vetoed yet. He says he has, and judging by his address and state of emergency, it seems like that's going to be true. Now, I think if they choose the budget route, the legislature chooses to fit this bill in the budget, then he may not veto. He may have to sort of just, absorb the legislation into his plan. Now, if they send it to his desk and he does veto, the legislature, I see they override it. I mean, based on other legislation that they've dealt with this session, they've shown to prove that they can override very easily. And so I think that they override if he chooses to veto. And then hopefully I guess, best case scenario is after a few years of this program being implemented and all the families that it helps, governor sees this and says, "Wow, I was wrong. This works." But
then takes credit for it, of course. That's usually the next thing.
Yeah, well, I guess most importantly, as long as the program's there and it works and it helps families, then people will see it. But
well, I hope for all the kids, and I really hope that we're going through an entire General Assembly election. I don't know if the same thing happens in North Carolina, but every 4 years, every seat in the Virginia General Assembly is up for election. So the issue is going to be coming up between June and November, especially in our 45-day long election season, that the issue is going to have to come up, and it will come up frequently there. And I'd love to be able to have you back on and kind of talk about how things are going in North Carolina, since you're kind of out here ahead of the rest of the thundering herd on this here. And I appreciate it, Nathan, for all that you do there. And gosh, if this keeps up, maybe capitalism will come back as well. If Milton Friedman is this right about school choice, maybe capitalism will work too.
Yeah, I hope so. And Joe, thanks for having me. I'm happy to jump on anytime and talk school choice with you. It's been a pleasure.
And remember, go get yourself the tickets to Freedom Fest in Memphis, Tennessee. And Ed Choice, just one of the many folks who are going to be part of the program. So that does it for us today. Again, edchoice.org. And keep following us at the Afternoon Constitutional. And until tomorrow afternoon at 3, as my children's bedtime reading often said, so long. And thanks for all the fish.